Hello and welcome to another episode of my sound design tutorial series. Nowhere the Boy here. This time, I'm going to show you how to create a playable synth from scratch in Reaktor Blocks. So, if you're not familiar with Reaktor, it's an incredible VST. It's not just one synth, it's a collection of so many synths, sequencers, samplers, effects, groove boxes. Not to mention the Reaktor community library. If you buy Reaktor, you get access to this library of over 5,000 synths, patches, effects, what have you. It's a limitless treasure trove of resources. And the other incredible part of Reaktor is Reaktor Blocks, and that's where we're going to be making this synth. So if you're interested in getting into modular synthesis, but the price point of hardware is a little too steep for you, Reaktor Blocks is a great place to start. I also recommend checking out VCV Rack, which is free and you can download, and I super recommend checking out and kind of feeling out if you like the modular workflow. So we're going to go and click this edit button, and the edit button will show the library, and that's where we're going to find the individual Reaktor blocks to start building our synth with. And if you click here, you can see we're going to go in these Reaktor blocks drop down here. You're going to see there's different types here. There's bento box, boutique, Digilog, driver, Kodiak, Monarch, rounds, user, utility, and West Coast in there. Just broken up in different ways. They all do slightly different types of modular synthesis. I would recommend going on Native Instruments website and checking out their Reaktor Blocks page, because they have a little write-up for each of these modules. And that's a great place to kind of figure out which modules do what. So let's start with a utility, because if we're going to make this a playable synth, we need to be able to send a MIDI signal in to Reaktor. So we're going to go ahead and choose Note In. And that's really straightforward. It gives us pitch, gate, note, pitch, bend, velocity, mod wheel, and aftertouch. And so that's for your keyboard. And you'll notice we're going to be toggling between these two different panels. So if we click to panel, that's going to show the front of the module, and we can adjust all of the parameters. Now, we do all the patching in this other window. So you'll notice me going back and forth, and it's really important to use both of the views. So you can see here now we have this utility note in, and I should mention there's these ins and these outs. And right now we're not going to worry about these ins, because these ins would be if we were running a signal into Reaktor, so into Reaktor Blocks. So not only in Reaktor Blocks can you create a sound, but you can process sounds too. So it's incredibly versatile. So here we're only going to worry about the out. So that's where the signal is going to go out to eventually. If I click on my keyboard, there's going to be no sound because we have no oscillator. We just have this utility note in. So we got to go find an oscillator. And let's start. So we go to library here. Let's go to Monarch and choose a Monarch oscillator. So this is a nice simple oscillator. So if we go to the other panel, you can see we have frequency control. We have FM, so we can do frequency modulation. We can control the range and the waveform. Let's go back to here, and we're going to start doing some patching. So I'm going to want to send the pitch information out of the note in and into the pitch for the oscillator. So that's going to control, so we can play the different notes on our keyboard, and it will play the different notes. And then we're going to need to do gate, because right now, if we just had the pitch going into the oscillator and we had it going out, we're just going to get a drone. We can control the pitch, but we have no envelope information here. That can be a little boring. So let's give ourselves some control there. So I'm going to go up to this bento box blocks folder, and we're going to get a VCA and an ADSR envelope. And the VCA is the voltage controlled amplifier. So that's when we press down on a note, it will open up and give us a signal. And then the ADSR is the attack, decay, sustain, and release. So I'm going to put the VCA after here, because we're going to go out of the synth into the VCA, because the VCA is controlling our volume. And then we're going to send the gate out of the note in and into the gate of the ADSR. And then we want to send the out of the ADSR into this mod A or mod B, really, it doesn't matter, into one of the modulation inputs of the VCA. And you'll notice all of these modules have a mod A and mod B, and all that means is we can send in, an LFO or an envelope to affect the parameters. So we're going to go out into the mod A, and then we're going to go out of the VCA and into the outs, and we're going to go into both the left and the right channel. So now let's go to the panel view, and if I press down on my keyboard, we still don't hear anything. And that's because we have to adjust this VCA. But you can tell we're sending a signal out because that node in is blinking like that. And then we can see we're getting a signal into the mod A because every time I press down the keyboard, you can see it blink. So we know it's working. So I'm going to click on the mod A button here, and you'll see we get these sliders so we can do the modulation control. And this is pretty similar to like the LFOs within Serum or any of those synths. So we'll select here and drag up. And now every time I press down the keyboard, we'll get sound. And right now, it's a little boring. So that's where we're going to use the envelope here with the attack, decay, sustain, and release. Maybe we want to have a slightly slower attack time and adjust the release time. We have a playable synth, but it sounds pretty basic. So let's give some interesting tonality to it. So first things first, let's go and add a filter. So I'm going to go and select this Paul filter. So we'll go out of the VCA now and into this filter. And then we'll go out of the filter into our out. And now if we play, we won't hear any difference yet, but we'll be able to kind of control it on the way out. So as we adjust the cutoff here, it's a nice low pass right there. We could be playing this, manually tweaking it, but I want to use the cutoff. So I'm going to go in the bento box here and select a mod LFO. And I'm going to take this LFO, and we're going to go out, and we're going to go into one of the mod A. So we're going to go and select the A, and now you can see we can adjust all of these knobs. And let's have the LFO start modulating it slightly. So now so we could also take this LFO and we could run it into maybe the mod A point on the Monarch oscillator. So now we select the A, and maybe we want to adjust the frequency a little bit so it kind of does a bit of a pitch bend. I should also mention with this node in utility, it gives us, some mod wheel options and glide here. So if you adjust this glide, you notice how we go immediately from one note to another. But if we up this glide, now let's go back to the patching view, and I saw this FM in on the oscillator, so let's send in another oscillator to do some frequency modulation. So let's take, I'm just going to choose the duality oscillator here. And so let's send the pitch out from our node in into that so we can play it. And then we'll send the out main into the FM. And so now and that might sound cool to LFO. So let's just try it out. That might sound even better with a quicker LFO. So, the awesome thing with Reaktor Blocks is we can use as many of these modules as we want. We can just go ahead and select another LFO, and maybe let's try a different one. Let's do a rounds LFO. So this one allows us to send in gate information, so it can be rhythmic. So we could send the gate information out of the node in, but I want it to kind of be this continuous sequence. So I'm going to go to the utility here and select the clock. And if we want to make a sequenced melody, this utility clock is awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and select external. So now it's set to our Ableton tempo. So it's all synced, nice and good to go. So if we press play, the clock starts. And let's set the gate maybe to eighths for the time being. So now we'll send this gate information into the rounds LFO, and let's send this rounds LFO out to the mod B of the Monarch oscillator. And let's select that and adjust the FM because now it's a little faster. So I'm going to take this duality oscillator that we're using to send into the FM on the Monarch oscillator, and let's start adjusting this pitch pretty significantly. So let's go all the way up to 48. Go all the way down. So there, I was adjusting the LFO rates. I turned the glide down. So once you start getting a patch like this, you can go in and adjust the parameters and really change the sound. So this is pretty interesting, but let's take this duality oscillator and let's have this be the playable synth. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the Monarch oscillator. And let's try out this one. I want to start with the Monarch oscillator because, it's really simple. We have the frequency, you have the FM, you have the different waveform type, but this duality oscillator gives us a lot right out of the gate. So let's go and take the pitch into the pitch and the out main into the VCA, and we'll keep everything really the same. Let's take the bento box LFO and throw it in the mod A, and we'll take the rounds LFO and put that in the mod B. So we have some modulation options. So now let's turn that back to 0. Oh, we're getting no sound. Haha. That's why we got to go out of the ADSR into the VCA. So that's the one. Really, the one thing with Reaktor Blocks is if you have anything incorrectly patched, you might not hear any sound. But it's also good in that if you patch it correctly, you will hear sound. It really rewards knowing what you're doing, and by thinking it out and really focusing on the signal flow, you're just going to get better at sound design in general, because that's what we're doing here is we are designing the sound from scratch. So let's take the ADSR out, throw it in mod A, and now we'll hear sound. So up here, we have a sine wave, and as we go down here, we'll get a square wave, and we can kind of get waves in between. And then this is pulse width modulation. And the really cool thing about the duality oscillator is this oscilloscope right here, so you can see what's happening to the waveform. And then you have FM, which we were doing earlier, frequency modulation. And then we have AM, or amplitude modulation. And then we have timbre modulation, timbre control, and offset. And you can really see what we're doing to the waveform. So obviously we could, continue tweaking these by hand, or we could start getting some modulation. So I'm going to double click on all these and turn them back to 0. And now I'm going to select the A modulation, which is our first LFO. And I'm going to get that to start LFOing the shape. And maybe the pulse width modulation and the frequency modulation and the timbre. And we could go ahead and adjust that rate. That high rate sounding really cool with this. So I'm going to leave that, and let's go and select the B modulation, that rounds LFO, and let's use it to LFO the mult and maybe the offset and the timbre mod. And let's do the AM as well. And right now I'm shuffling between octaves, and when you're creating a patch here in Reaktor Blocks, jump around because your patch might sound way cooler up 4 octaves or 5 octaves or down. Right now we're playing with like a sustained pitch, but we could go ahead and LFO this pitch, and now slowing that LFO down on the pitch, we're getting these awesome glides. Really, really fun. I'm having a blast with this. And that's just scratching the surface with this duality oscillator. We have the different sync modes. We could adjust the mult. So there you have it. We made 2 pretty cool playable synths in Reaktor Blocks, and I think it's awesome working with Reaktor Blocks because once you get a patch that you really like, it's just a good feeling because you made it from scratch. There are so many other modules, not just here, but in the Reaktor community library. I recommend checking out the Euro React bundle if you have Reaktor. That almost doubles the amount of modules that you have, and if you take a look at the ones that I have here, it comes with all of these different effects, mixing modules, modulation. You have this quadrature LFO that's really cool. You have all these different oscillators, utilities, interesting sequencers. So it's really like standing at the edge of a really deep pool, and you just got to dive in and really explore what's there. So I hope this was helpful. I'm definitely going to do more tutorials with Reaktor Blocks. I think it would be cool in the future to do, a sequenced pattern, or even create some drums in Reaktor Blocks. It would be really fun. So stay tuned for that. And as always, if you have suggestions for what you'd like to see me cover next in a future tutorial, drop a comment. And until next time, I'm Nowhere the Boy. I hope you have an excellent rest of your day and keep on making those beats.